You know that feeling when you're in a meeting and you just know the group is making a huge mistake?
Oh, yeah.
Your palms get sweaty, you
Yeah.
want to say something, but you look around, everyone's nodding,
Mhm.
and you just, you fold.
It's an almost universal human experience.
Mhm.
But then maybe you see one other person just slightly shake their head or raise a hand, and
I
suddenly.
Suddenly you feel like you can take on the whole room.
Exactly.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. We've got a great stack of research here on the psychology of resistance. We're going to dig into why we cave, and I think more importantly, the specific things that help us stand our ground.
Yeah, and we're breaking it down into two main pillars. You've got social support, which is all about who's in the room with you,
The external stuff.
and then locus of control, which is about what's going on inside your own head, the internal.
So let's start with the room. We absolutely have to talk about the ASH studies. Most people know the headline, right? You show people a lot of different lengths.
Right, and you surround them with actors who all intentionally pick the wrong line.
And the poor participant, they usually just cave and agree to fit in.
Right, conformity in that vacuum sits at about 33%. But the headline always misses the most important part of that study.
The variation.
The variation where Ash introduced a single ally, just one other person in the room who disagreed with the group.
And the drop in conformity is just massive, isn't it?
It plummets. It goes from 33% all the way down to just 5.5%. But here's the real nugget, the thing that I think matters for anyone listening.
Okay.
The ally didn't even have to give the correct answer.
Wait, hold on. So if the group says line A and the right answer is line B,
The ally could say line C, a totally different wrong answer, and it still worked.
that's wild.
It is. Ash found that it just broke the group's unanimity. It proves you don't need someone to validate your version of the truth. You just need the spell of consensus to be broken.
It's like the peer pressure balloon just pops the second there's one pinprick in it.
Yeah.
But, looking at lines on a page is pretty low stakes. Does this hold up when things get serious? Like in the Milgram experiments?
Unfortunately, yes. And we know the Milgram setup. It's brutal. Participants are ordered to give what they think are electric shocks to a stranger.
And in the baseline, something like 65% of people go all the way to the maximum voltage just because a guy in a lab coat tells them to.
But there was a key variation. The two peers rebel condition.
Where they weren't alone in the room.
Exactly. They put the participant in there with two other teachers who were actually actors. And when the order came to deliver the next shock, those two actors refused. They stood up and said no.
And just seeing that rebellion.
Obedience just collapsed. It dropped from 65% to only 10%. It's the same mechanism. The peers became role models. They didn't have to argue with the authority. They just showed the participant that saying no was an available option.
So lesson one, if you want to resist, get a buddy. But you can't always rely on that. Sometimes you are on an island, which I guess brings us to the internal side of things, Rotter's locus of control.
Right. A concept from 1966. It's basically a spectrum. On one end, you have an internal locus of control.
These are the people who believe they're the architects of their own life.
That's it. If they succeed, it was their hard work. If they fail, it's on them to fix it.
And on the other end, the external locus.
These people see life as something that happens to them. It's luck, it's fate, it's the system, it's their boss. Things are out of their hands.
And I'm going to guess the internals, the captains of their own ships, are the ones who resist social pressure.
Much, much better. Because they take personal responsibility, they're more likely to seek out information for themselves instead of just taking the group's word for it.
Okay, this makes sense in theory, but does it actually translate to, real-world success? Or are these people just stubborn?
Well, there's a fascinating study on Russian businesswomen that really answers this. It looked at their wages and their locus of control.
And found a connection.
A direct correlation. Women with a high internal locus of control were significantly higher wage earners.
Because if you think you control your destiny, you're probably going to ask for that raise. You're going to negotiate harder.
Exactly right. They didn't just accept the status quo of lower pay. The study showed what we call ecological validity, which is just a fancy way of saying it works in the real world. They sought promotions, they changed jobs, they took action because they fundamentally believed their actions mattered.
So pulling this all together for you listening, the toolkit for resistance seems to be twofold. You either cultivate that internal belief that you are in charge,
Or, if you don't have that, you find someone, anyone to stand with you.
And that actually leads to a really interesting kind of provocative thought to end on.
Yeah, so think about this. We know from that Russian study that internals are more successful because they refuse to just accept things as they are.
Okay.
And we know from Ash that any dissent, even a wrong answer, is enough to break the spell of conformity.
So if you're building a team or a company,
The implication is that you shouldn't just look for smart people who all get along. Maybe you should be specifically looking for disagreeable people.
the contrarian.
Maybe the most valuable person in your next meeting isn't the one with the right answer, but the one who's just willing to be wrong out loud to prove that the consensus can actually be broken.
A strong argument for having a devil's advocate on your team. Something to think about. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.